Vincent Intondi is I would say, world-renowned scholar on nuclear issues, author of the book African Americans Against the Bomb, and the new director of Oregon Physicians for Social Responsibility. We are very excited to have OPSR joining our network and having Vincent here in the Pacific Northwest to give us some help uh, with our sometimes avoidant politicians here. Uh, not taking action on nuclear weapons. So I think he's got a lot to share, and I'm just gonna turn it to you, Vin. Floor is yours.
All right. Before I get started, I want to apologize because I have laryngitis and I have a cough that I can't shake. So my voice is pretty raspy. So I apologize for that, or if I have to pause to cough. But we're going to plow through this. So thank you. I'm right now as executive director of Oregon PSR, splitting my time because I live in DC. So right now I'm actually in Portland. So I'm doing 2 weeks here, 2 weeks there until we move permanently to the West Coast. So that's what's happening right now. But right now, currently, I am in Portland. So it's great to start connecting and being with different groups like this and meeting all amazing individuals, especially so many of you whose shoulders we stand on, have been doing just the yeoman's work for so long on these issues. So I'll give you a brief kind of intro of kind of how I got started in this field or what my research focuses on, and then we can work out some Q&A. And so in June of 1964, there was a group of atomic bomb survivors and peace activists that were on a world peace study mission. And when they came to the United States, the person that organized their stay here was Yuri Kachiyama, a great Japanese American activist. And she asked them, while you're here in the United States, what is it that you would like to do most? And all the atomic bomb survivors answered, meet Malcolm X. But at the time, Malcolm was traveling through the Middle East and through Africa, and Yuri Kachiyama was very good friends with Malcolm. In fact, if you ever see the photo when he was assassinated, she's actually there holding his head up. And so she wrote letters to Malcolm and tried to reach out, but figured he didn't really get any of them. And the last day of the atomic bomb survivors being at the United States for this, she had a reception for them at her apartment in Harlem, and there was a knock at the door. And when she answered it, it was Malcolm. He came back. And Malcolm he spent the day with the atomic bomb survivors and said, the bomb that hit you was the atomic bomb. The bomb that hit us was racism. And he spent the time with them talking about how racism and in the Vietnam War and colonialism and nuclear weapons were all connected in this fight because he understood what so many before him understood, that these were links in the same chain. And so that is what my research and kind of life in this world has been, is examining this connection between race and nuclear weapons. And so when I look at Black history, as I've taught for over 20, 25 years, that history was really written in US history for so long by rich white racist men from the South in a lot of cases. And it wasn't until the late 1960s when you had the rise of the Black arts movement and the Black studies movement, people like Amiri Baraka and Sonia Sanchez and Nikki Giovanni, who were demanding that this history now be taught from their point of view. And so that's when we start to see the rise of Chicano studies and Asian studies and Black studies. And so there's still a lot of catching up to do in getting this narrative right and looking at it from this point of view. And so I look at Black history specifically as a giant brick wall, and we're still filling in the bricks to complete that narrative. And when I looked at nuclear weapons in the Black freedom movement, there was a brick that was missing and that I felt needed to be filled in. And when I pitched this idea to scholars, and most said that I was not going to find anything, that this was crazy, that African Americans were not part of this struggle at all. And they were wrong. And my research started when I found that story about Malcolm and then just went from there. And so when the US dropped the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, a week after the atomic bombings, Gallup ran a poll in which 85% of the American public agreed with Truman's decision to use nuclear weapons. A Roper poll in the same time frame showed that 22% of the American public wished that Japan hadn't surrendered so he could have dropped more nuclear weapons and killed more people. And in fact, no poll up until late October of 1945 ever showed more than 4.5% of the American public questioning Truman's decision to use nuclear weapons in Japan. But that wasn't the case in the Black community. And of course, nothing is monolithic. But so many in the Black community, before any real peace movement around this issue was formed, from beauty salons and truck drivers and Black churches, scientists, artists, entertainers, scholars, journalists, were questioning and protesting Truman's decision to use nuclear weapons in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And so, why was the American public so on board with this decision? Well, because when it came to the war and we look at our media at that time, we were very careful to separate Germans from Nazis and fascists from Italians. But when it came to Japan, everybody was guilty for Pearl Harbor. And there was a genocidal race hatred against the people of Japan in this country that is unparalleled, far worse than anything we saw after people of Middle Eastern descent after 9/11 or people of Asian descent with COVID. Uh, Everything in our media of the Japanese were portrayed as being yellow monkeys and vermin and roaches and yellow apes. And why? Well, when you reduce a group of people to being less than human, it makes it easier to commit violence against them, right? So we create this subhuman, we created this other. So we weren't dropping the atomic bombs on mothers and fathers and sons and daughters. It was on something that was subhuman. And of course, we did this all the way back to dating back to slavery and how we justified our actions in institutional racism up till then. And we continue to do this, right? When we no longer refer to undocumented immigrants as human beings and we call them aliens, when you make that jump, they're no longer human. So it's easy to say that we should, put them in cages and separate them from their families or electrocute them or kill them, disappear them, because again, the translation is not fully human. When we look at Palestine, and again, when we are seeing a genocide take place, it's not human beings that we are told. We are told that these are people that don't look like us or talk like us or smell like us or act like us or pray like us. And so therefore, they're not truly one of us, not fully human. And so we see this with the Vietnam War, with the Korean War, over and over again with people of color is they're not fully human. So it makes it easier to commit these atrocities. And that was the case when Truman did this. And when we look at the first kind of protest, I looked at Black newspapers. And, for a lot of my students that I had over the years, when I tell them about the Black newspapers, the Chicago Defender, the Pittsburgh Courier, the Baltimore Afro-American, now they can go into their databases in their college libraries and hit a couple keystrokes and they have all the information. For me, I was in microfilm and I was getting each issue and going through that, they don't even know what that means. And going through not just the columnists that I was finding that they were being critical of Truman, but also looking at letters to the editor. And again, there was a common theme of being scared, of being angry, of questioning this decision and not just accepting it blindly. I started looking at Black pastors and their sermons in the Black church, and there was a very different narrative from what I saw with white pastors, and it was an apocalyptic narrative of we don't have enough religion, that this genie is out of the bottle. I mean, when we look at even our own military at the time, the Marines had a motto of "Remember Pearl Harbor, keep them dying." General Joseph Stilwell wrote to his wife, quote, "When I think of how these bow-legged cockroaches have ruined our calm lives, it makes me want to wrap Jap guts around every lamppost in Asia," unquote. So this was the mentality and the feeling of our military during this period. And of course, so much of this starts from the top. The first person I saw to really come out and criticize and question the issue of race in this decision was Langston Hughes. Langston Hughes was writing in the Chicago Defender, and he asked the question, why did we not drop the atomic bombs on Germany or on Italy? Why was it on a people of color? And he was right to do so. Truman wasn't the most racist president in US history. We probably have that right now, but certainly one of the most. If you look at Truman, his own history, he rarely, in his papers, in his diaries, and his letters to his wife, he rarely ever refers to African Americans as anything other than the N-word. He admits in one letter to his wife that he believes that Black people should be in Africa, yellow men in Asia, and white people in America, and that he admits, I guess, some race prejudice. He actually sent a $10 check to join the Ku Klux Klan at one point, but they sent it back to him because he refused to fire Catholic workers in one of his businesses in Missouri. When he was doing interviews throughout his life, he routinely would say that he used to, in his family's history, you would get slaves as wedding presents to start out the housekeeping with. So his past is just littered with racism throughout. And of course, when we dropped the atomic bombs and he was first notified that we just instantly killed over 100,000 people, the first thing he did was jump up in the air and say, "This is the greatest thing in history." So these are things that we don't, you don't see when we look at kind of the more popular history of Truman. We don't talk about this side of him. And so looking at Langston Hughes, I also found a letter from his friend Zora Neale Hurston, where she was writing a letter to her friend Claude Barnett, in which she was angry that the Black community wasn't protesting this issue more and referred to Truman as, quote, the butcher of Asia. And of some of the more far-reaching or the most loud criticisms immediately came from the Black Popular Front. Those like the Council on African Affairs, the National Negro Congress, and specifically the great W.E.B. Du Bois and Paul Robeson. Du Bois, who was lionized in the Black community and in Asia and had traveled there multiple times, was writing on the Black press, had likened Truman to Hitler, calling him one of the greatest killers of our day, and said what he had done in Japan would set back the progress of colored nations for decades to come. Paul Robeson, this amazing individual that I'm so sad that students don't learn about today, this athlete, amazing singer, an actor, an activist. This was an issue that was near and dear to his heart throughout his entire life. And in fact, a year after the atomic bombings, there was a rally in Madison Square Garden where 20,000 people were there. And he said to the crowd, where do you think the United States is getting the uranium to build nuclear weapons? And the answer, of course, was the Belgian-controlled Congo. And so he's making those connections between colonialism in Africa and dropping the atomic bombs in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. But a lot of this initial criticism that we see in 45 to around 49 is silenced with the rise of McCarthyism and the rise of the House and Un-American Activity Committees. In that time period, it was very dangerous to be against nuclear weapons. To be anti-nuclear meant you were now pro-communist. And so a lot of these organizations fell mute. Careers were destroyed. People were deported, put in jail. So it was very dangerous to be what was known as black and red. And so in that regard, there was one group in particular that made a conscious decision to make a hard turn to the right and ally themselves with Truman on this issue. And that was the NAACP. Originally, they had come out against the atomic bombings, but calculated that this would maybe help them get civil rights legislation. This was a bargain, of course, that didn't pay off because Truman, when he ran for re-election against Dewey and Henry Wallace, actually he said he was going to pass a civil rights legislation package, which he never did. Outside of desegregating the military, that was as far as he went, which should not be a real surprise when you look at his history. But not every group in the Black community saw peace or disarmament as a negotiating chip. And so at the same time, in 1950, out of Stockholm came what's known as the Stockholm Peace Appeal, or the Ban the Bomb Pledge. And so Du Bois and Robeson started the Peace Information Center and brought that appeal to the United States, trying to gain signatures about nuclear disarmament and banning the bomb. And they targeted the Black community and their own people and got over 2.5 million signatures. People like Charlie Parker and Duke Ellington, Marian Anderson were all in favor of this. And they didn't care if they were being called communists. Their thing was, we have children that we don't want them to die from nuclear weapons. This petition got over 60 million signatures worldwide. So it was gaining traction, but in the United States, it was deep. It was known as a tool of communism, that it was coming out of communist bloc nations, that it was propaganda. Excuse me. And so what's remarkable is that people are willing to, when we talk about signing petitions today, it's not the same as back then. We can do that from our computers. We go on change.org. We're one click away from being an armchair activist and saying, look what I did. But again, back then it was different. You were physically signing this. You were going door to door, and people were getting physically beaten for signing this, losing their jobs, their livelihood, again, possibly being deported. So there were real consequences to put your name on something like this to eliminate nuclear weapons. And in the early 1950s, specifically 1955, you see so many things kind of coming together with these issues. So if you think about it, in the summer of 1955, you have the heinous murder of Emmett Till in Money, Mississippi. A few months later in December is when Rosa Parks refused to give up her seat on the bus. But in the middle of that in 1955 is what's known as the Bandung Conference in Indonesia, the first all-African Asian conference of countries coming together. And if you look at the platform of the Bandung Conference, it was very clear that the things they were against and working towards were they were against nuclear weapons, they were against colonialism, and they were against white supremacy. And there were many Black activists in the United States that either attended or sent their regards. While the US media didn't cover it as much as they should, it certainly was covered in the Black press, and people were paying attention to what was going on at the Bandung Conference. And so all of this now is leading to what we start to see happening in the late 1950s, where in late 1959, going into 1960, you have, again, things coming together in which the Algerian War for Independence is happening, and Ghana is having their independence movement with the rise of Kwame Nkrumah. Decolonization movements are happening throughout the African continent. And at the same time, the French government, wanting to be a nuclear power, decided to test their first nuclear weapon in Africa, in the Sahara. And the people in Ghana truly feared what that would do, what the fallout would do to the cocoa industry. And there was one person that was seeing what was happening in civil rights here, and what was seeing what was happening with colonialism and with nuclear weapons, and put it all together. And that was the great Bayard Rustin. Another person that a lot of students don't know about because Bayard Rustin was gay, and so he was marginalized and iced out of a lot of this history. Bayard Rustin was arguably the greatest organizer of the civil rights movement. You certainly would not have had a March on Washington without Bayard Rustin. And so Rustin, who had been involved in this issue all the way back, since 1945, excuse me, put a team together of British activists and US activists and African activists, worked with Nkrumah and went to Africa to try to stop the French tests. And not everybody was okay with that. I saw letters that A. Philip Randolph was saying, writing to Rustin, he was saying, we need you here in the United States to work on the primaries for President Kennedy and civil rights issues. What are you doing in Africa trying to stop nuclear weapons? And Rustin was saying, don't you understand how these things are all connected? This is the most important work I could possibly do to save humanity. And so Rustin, physically with other activists, put their bodies on the line to try to stop the French from doing this. And after multiple protests, the French finally are able to test their nuclear weapons in the Sahara. And we are still literally today, there's still research about those tests and the fallout and what the repercussions have been. And protests broke out all over the place to protest what was happening with the French government and what they were doing. And so all of this was now coming together in the late 1950s. And this leads into the civil rights movement, which is remarkable that on the heels of the civil rights movement, all of the freedom struggle and the things that the Black community were fighting for, that they still saw that this issue was not something that should be tabled or sidelined or an appendage to their movement, that it was central to their movement. And again, it's not monolithic. Not everybody thought the same way, but overwhelmingly, this was the case. And so when we turn to the 1960s and we look at Dr. King, many say that Dr. King jumped into foreign policy with his Beyond Vietnam speech, which was at Riverside Church on April 4th, 1968, literally a year to the day he died. And that is when he made his comments criticizing the Vietnam War, calling the United States, quote, the greatest purveyor of violence in the world. However, if you look at the nuclear weapons issue, he actually started speaking out about it publicly 10 years before, in 1957. In 1957, he made his first comments about banning the bomb and consistently did this throughout his life. He thought that the peace movement and the civil rights movement should be and were inextricably linked. He would say, what does it matter if we get all of the social justice, if we're integrating lunch counters and water fountains, if we're all dead from nuclear war? That makes no sense. Look at the money that is being spent on nuclear weapons and where it could be going to our community. He would talk to the Black church and he would talk to Spelman students and college students about the nuclear issue. And this is when he starts saying that an injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. It is when he starts connecting now the three evils that he talks about: militarism, racism, and capitalism, and how these things are linked. And where was Dr. King learning this? From his wife, of course. Coretta Scott King was a long-seasoned activist, dating back to her days at Antioch College. She had been involved in Women's Strike for Peace and Women's International League of Peace and Freedom. And so she always thought that these issues were connected. And, for her, there were so many Black women that were in the peace movement and on the front lines of this issue, but they had to deal with the racism that came within the peace movement. The peace movement had racism and homophobia and misogyny. We can't ignore that. And so there was an example I had found where Women's Strike for Peace were having a convention in Detroit, and the Black women wanted to have signs and wanted to have a platform that said desegregation or disintegration. And the white members said, absolutely not. We're not going to bring race into this. And it was Coretta who had to step in and kind of broker the deal and manage these things. When we look at other Black women, people like Lorraine Hansberry, who, we want to, again, with so many African Americans, we want to kind of put them in their neat, nice little categorical boxes in the textbook and study them for Black History Month and call it a day. So when it comes to Lorraine Hansberry, should be known for a Raisin in the Sun. That does not encapsulate all that she was. She was a feminist, she was a socialist, and she was an anti-nuclear activist. She was somebody that famously went and saw a documentary on Hiroshima and came out of the theater saying, no more Hiroshimas, not now and not ever. The last play that she ever wrote before she died was about about a nuclear holocaust and what happens to the survivors. And she had said that a lot of the things she was learning about nuclear weapons and disarmament were from her mentor, Jimmy Baldwin, who was also heavily involved in this issue. But again, we don't think about when we're talking about nuclear disarmament. These names are forgotten or marginalized. It's like Ralph Ellison says in Invisible Man, third line of the book. I'm invisible, you see, because you choose not to see me. So we pretend that they don't exist in this movement. And so when we look through the 1960s and going into the 70s, with the Vietnam War, again, we were threatening to use nuclear weapons. We had threatened to use nuclear weapons with the Korean War. Over and over again, the Black community is seeing that we are threatening to use nuclear weapons on a people of color. And so when it came to the Vietnam War, groups like the Black Panther Party championed nuclear disarmament. If you read Executive Mandate #1 of the Black Panther Party that Bobby Seale read in Sacramento in 1966, it specifically mentions the atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I asked him, was this intentional? He said, of course it was. We always saw ourselves in connected with international movements, which is why Kathleen Cleaver and Eldridge Cleaver were asked to speak in Hiroshima about this. We see this, of course, in the arts movement. John Coltrane, of course, played a concert in Nagasaki in favor of nuclear disarmament and to try to bring attention to this issue. And then, we see groups in the 1980s really coming together because in the 1980s, so many groups that were exhausted and fatigued from the Vietnam War and didn't really know where they should put their energy. That all changed when Ronald Reagan came into power. Reagan restarted the peace movement again because he was so brutal in his rhetoric and his spending and what he was doing. If we look even before him with Jimmy Carter, and when Jimmy Carter wanted to build the neutron bomb, who was one of the people in his administration that was trying to talk him out of that and influence him? It was Andy Young, who was his UN ambassador and had also been Dr. King's right-hand man throughout the civil rights movement. And so when Reagan comes into power, Reagan says that he is going to now massively expand our nuclear arsenal. He is going to massively expand the budget on nuclear weapons and on the military. He is talking about a winnable nuclear war. Many of his cabinet members, when they testify before Congress to be approved, are saying things like, well, only 10 million people will die in nuclear war in the United States. That's not everybody. If we give everybody a shovel and a door and we tell them to dig a hole big enough and they put the door over it, they'll be okay. These were some of the things they were hearing. And then you were seeing, where were the cuts going to happen? Not to the rich. What we were seeing is the cuts to fund all this were happening to programs that help the poor, and in many cases, the Black community. And so African Americans especially saw all this and said, no, we can't allow this to happen. And so we start to see now anti-nuclear activism in the 80s coming from all different directions. One in particular was with athletes. I love that we have socially conscious athletes again with LeBron James and Carmelo Anthony and Serena Williams and Colin Kaepernick, of course. But when we think of socially conscious athletes, we often think of the 1968 Olympics in Mexico City with John Carlos and Tommy Smith raising their fists for human rights. We think, of course, of Muhammad Ali. We don't think of Athletes United for Peace. This was a group of professional athletes in the United States and in Russia that were working together to try to end nuclear weapons. And so these were people like JoJo Washington of the Boston Celtics, people like Marianne Washington, the first African-American woman on the U.S. national basketball team. The entire Baltimore Orioles baseball team went to Hiroshima at one point together in the 80s to look at this issue. And they were having relay races and they were putting out PSAs with Russian athletes trying to stop this. And so we know the power of what athletes can have for especially younger folks that they look up to them. And then we also started to see this with the art movement. We started to see this all coming together with even politicians, which I'll talk about in a moment. And it merged together to what now we know is the June 12th, 1982 rally in Central Park in New York City. That was before the Women's March. It was it still holds it's the largest single piece demonstration in United States history, and only surpassed in terms of numbers by probably the Women's March and in together the No Kings marches. And when that rally happened, that march happened for the special session on nuclear disarmament at the UN. If you take, I wrote my second book all about this rally in March, and if you take an aerial photo, it would look like the millions of people that, again, it's a white middle class issue, and that's who was there. but that doesn't tell the true story. This rally was led and organized by the LGBTQ community, by women, and especially by African Americans. 50% of the leadership that day were Black. You were seeing thousands of people of color pouring out of Bed-Stuy and Harlem because they were looking at the issues of where money was being spent at that time, which was abysmal. I mean, if you look at Detroit and you look at certain cities and what it was like in Baltimore, especially for even like the mortality rates of babies, it was catastrophic, all to pay for nuclear weapons. And so when you look at the millions of people that were rallying for nuclear disarmament, you had people like Sweet Honey and the Rock and Gil Scott Heron and all sorts of African American poets and artists that were there that were performing and giving speeches. And Sonia Sanchez wrote a poem about June 12th. This was all over the place. And so when you see the 1980s, you have 121 books that came out during that time on nuclear disarmament. You had films like The Day After, which 100 million people watched. You had the rally at Central Park. You had all this organizing. There was real hope there, and it worked. It changed things. You know, we went from 70,000 nuclear weapons in the world to 13,000, 12,000 now. You know, at one point, the US had 25,000 nuclear weapons. We have 5,500 now. So we have to celebrate those wins. And, you know, looking back at the time, of course, Reagan wasn't going to admit it changed him, but it did. And later in life, Reagan's wife and pollsters and cabinet members all admitted that they knew what was happening. And they couldn't turn their head to a million people demanding nuclear disarmament. And that's why Reagan came out and said that he is now in favor of never using nuclear weapons and it can never be done. Now, the one caveat to that is what we got out of the 1980s is what's known as the INF Treaty. That was a remarkable treaty that eliminated whole classes of nuclear weapons with the U.S. and Russia. But we could have done so much more. I mean, when we look at the Cold War and who really ended the Cold War, it was Gorbachev. He was the visionary during that time. And Gorbachev famously meets with Ronald Reagan. And he says to him, I am willing to eliminate all nuclear weapons right here and right now. I will do it. And you do the same. All I'm asking is that this Star Wars, this missile defense thing you're doing, don't weaponize space. Keep it in the laboratory for testing for 10 years. And I will eliminate all nuclear weapons right now. And at that golden hour, Reagan said no and walked away. So we could have done it. And so a lot of this kind of, once the Cold War ended, there was this almost this exhale of like, okay, the fear is gone now. And that's when we start to see a lot of this stuff turn now. And we see a lapse in a lot of the organizing and things around nuclear disarmament. And so when I wrote the book, African Americans Against the Bomb, and a lot of this, of course, is in there, the book came out in 2015. And at that time, of course, President Obama was the president, and I knew I was going to have to tackle that issue in the book, which was very difficult because as a historian, the last thing you want to do is predict something and then be wrong, and then it's in a book forever, right? So, you know, President Obama had spoke out against nuclear weapons as a student at Columbia, as a state senator, organizer, and when he ran for president. It's important to understand that he is certainly not the first Black politician that championed this issue. When Reagan was trying to put the MX missile program in Utah, it was Ron Dellums out of California, the Black congressman who led the Congressional Black Caucus, who went there and met with Spencer Kimball, head of the Mormon Church in Utah, and convinced him to come out publicly against the MX missile program. The Congressional Black Caucus had been leaders on this fight for many, many years. If you look at Jesse Jackson when he ran for president in 84 and 88, his platform was far more radical and in terms of nuclear disarmament than any Democratic candidate. And he got millions of votes when he ran. So there is a history. Harold Washington, the first Black mayor of Chicago, who was a hero to President Obama, won multiple awards for the work that he had done on pushing for nuclear disarmament and not having those materials transported through the streets of Chicago. And so when Obama comes into office, I used to, in a partnership with Raisin-Macon University, when I was the director of research for American University's Nuclear Studies Institute, I used to go to Japan and teach there every summer in Hiroshima and Nagasaki and have students from around the country here be with students from Japan to study this issue. And I say that because every year we would also be guests at the ceremonies in Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August. And the year that Obama became president, that year, he goes and gives what's known as the Prague speech, one of the second big speech he gave. And it was in April of 2009. And it was the most anti-nuclear speech any president had ever given, with the possible exception of President Kennedy's commencement address at American University in June of 1963, known as the Peace Speech. And after that speech, when I went to Japan that year, the mayor of Hiroshima started a campaign called the Obama Majority because they were so excited about what they thought he was going to do. And people were walking around with Obama Majority t-shirts on. It was the first time Obama let a U.S. ambassador, Ambassador Ruse, attend the ceremony in Hiroshima, which was significant. Excuse me. I had people in Japan that once they found out I was from the US were literally handing me stacks of letters addressed to the president to thank him for what he said he was going to do on nuclear weapons. And of course, I sent them to him. So there was real optimism there. And he did start out doing some great things. He put together the nuclear security summits, in which he brought leaders together to get loose nuclear weapons making materials into safe hands. And so they couldn't fall in dirty bombs and things of that nature. He was able to get the New START treaty done with Russia, which, of course, we are now under 100 days of expiring. And that is the last agreement, the last treaty we have with Russia. And so, obviously, that is critical. He also did what I think is the most important thing of his presidency, which, without firing a single shot, got the Iran nuclear deal to happen. And up until Trump trashed it, it was working and it was important. It's just staggering that we don't have it anymore. And then symbolically, I think it was really important that Obama was the first sitting president to visit Hiroshima while in office. I will never forget being on, Zoom or Skype at 3 in the morning or whatever it was for the time difference with atomic bomb survivors that are dear friends of mine, and how they were moved because he was there. So symbolically, it mattered. Now, does that mean Obama did everything I wanted? No. Obama never took nuclear weapons off hair trigger alert. He never changed the sole authority process to launch nuclear weapons. He agreed to the $1 trillion modernization plan of nuclear weapons, continued subcritical nuclear tests. But I don't put that all on President Obama. I put a lot of that on us. If we wanted him to change on this issue, then we should have been in the streets making him do what he said he was going to do. We should have been a million strong again. But I understand also it was very hard for a lot of us, at least for me, because there was such racism towards him that I myself felt conflicted of how far to push. There were many times when I would say, if another president was doing this, would I be in the streets? Why am I not doing this with President Obama, right? Why did I fall in this mode of defending him because of the overt racism that he was dealing with? And so for me, it was, wait, I'm always against the man, but now my man is the man. I'm not sure how to handle this, right? So there was a lot of that for us in the progressive community of what to do with that. And so where are we now? Well, obviously it is bleak and scary with having a madman with Trump with the ability to end life on the planet in 20 minutes. That's where we are at right now. He has called for the resumption of nuclear testing, which again would be catastrophic. We are spending $56 billion a year right now on nuclear weapons. That comes out to $107,000 a minute and $1,796 a second on nuclear weapons when we have people that cannot eat. And so for me, it's very easy with the world that we're in right now, where you kind of wake up in the morning and you scroll for 5 minutes and you are just reeling and feel like you just got punched in the gut 50 times and you don't know what to do. It's easy to say that you just, want to divorce yourself from all of it. I get it. I have those days. And for a lot of my students, they would say to me, Professor, I'm trying not to get disappeared by ICE or killed in police brutality on the way to school, and I'm trying to pay student loans off and put food on the table and provide for my family. And I'm working 3 jobs. And oh, by the way, you want me to stop nuclear weapons too? So I get it. And it's a harder issue to educate people on because, climate change is much more tangible. You can see the weather changing. You can see what's happening. And there are things you can do to say, I stopped the Keystone Pipeline, or I was at Standing Rock. And these might not be the be all end all of climate change, but it's agency, right? You can say you did something. When you start talking about Sentinel missiles and ICBMs, your eyes gloss over. You feel like you need a PhD in international relations or physics to understand it. So it's much more harder to get everybody involved in this. But when we see the juxtaposition today of Russia and the UK and the US, three, you know, countries that have so many of the nuclear weapons in the world, that have colonialist pasts, that in terms of the UK and the US have a slave owning past, and with Russia, an internal slave owning past, that have such an utter regard for life, and in many cases, Black life. And on the other side, we have what is the TPNW, the Treaty on the Prohibition of Nuclear Weapons, that was signed by over 100 nations, that was ratified and put into force in 2021. Um, to see that this treaty that is being led by the global south, to see Africa as a continent damn near monolithic on the issue of nuclear disarmament right now, when we see that this is a tool, it's not the be all end all, but it is a tool that we can use. There was once landmines that were used in war, but we passed a treaty and we shamed countries and we worked to get landmines out of war. The same with biological weapons and chemical weapons. And the same can be done with nuclear weapons. When we look at trying to get to nuclear disarmament, I look at it as building a house. And the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty, which is failing, but is looked at as the cornerstone of that house. Well, the TPNW is the capstone. There's a lot of floors that we need to build in between, but that's where I believe we ultimately need to be, is with the TPNW. I do a lot of work right now with the United Nations and with the TPNW and countries and negotiating and things of that nature. So I do feel a strong, a pull that this is the way that we should be putting our attention and what we should be focusing on. It also is very much like the Freeze Initiative of the 80s, in which you don't need a PhD to understand it. It is comprehensive, it is direct, and you can take the TPNW like the Freeze Initiative, and you can bring that to your city councils. You can bring that to your mayors. You can bring that to your congressmen. It is something you can actively work on. And there are so many organizations you can link up with, including all of us that are on this, with the TPNW. So I think that is the best way forward. We are starting to see breaks in NATO countries at the meeting of states parties for the TPNW, where they are being at least official observers. We are seeing new countries every day sign on and ratify the TPNW. And so, the problem is that the media doesn't want to cover this, and, people don't understand it. And so what drives me is every action I'm doing, I'm asking myself, am I educating? Am I motivating? Or am I inspiring somebody? Whether it's a social media post, whether it's my work with reconstituting the Nuclear Times Magazine, my work at OPSR, all of it looks at, how do we work together on this issue? And a lot of it comes to education. For 20 years, I had freshmen and sophomores come into my classes knowing nothing about this issue, nothing. We have figured out how to talk about really difficult topics like slavery and the Holocaust for younger generations, children's books and things of that nature. We haven't done that for this issue. Why? Right? We need to show how this is important. And for a lot of teachers I talk with and work with and train in elementary schools and in junior high and high school, it's not about creating brand new curriculum. They're already spread too thin. They don't have the bandwidth. It's about showing them how they can incorporate it in their existing courses. So again, if there's a music teacher that gets to a section on jazz, that's when you can talk about John Coltrane and Charlie Parker's work on this issue. If you have an English teacher that is assigning A Raisin in the Sun, you can take time to talk about Lorraine Hansberry's work on this. There are ways that you can incorporate these things in. If you have a world language class and maybe the kids are studying Mandarin, you can have them link up with a class in China and together learn the language while coming up with a nuclear weapons treaty. So there are different ways that we can work with educators to help them incorporate this into their classes. Looking even at video games, I tell the story often where I had a neighbor, and he's 14 years old, white kid from privilege, and he comes out one day and he's very excited. I said, "Hey, how you doing, man? What's going on?" He said, "I'm so happy. I killed so many people in Call of Duty that I got a nuclear weapon as a prize, and I can't wait to use it tonight." And of course, I'm like stumbling backwards, and of course, I couldn't help it anymore. So I was like, "Well, tell me tonight. I'd like to hear when, at what point in the game, the people that you do this to get their colostomy bags. Let me know when they get their prosthetic limbs. What happens there?" And of course, he was like, and I had to I said to his parents, "I'm sorry, but you want to be like, do you realize what's really happening? And we're starting to see a resurgence of this. Oppenheimer broke the doors open a little bit on culture. Now we have House of Dynamite. We know that the producers that did Threads, the great show on Netflix, is now going to remake the film that was done, it escapes me now the name, from the UK in the 1980s. They're going to redo that one. There's going to be Annie Jacobson's book, A Nuclear War, is going to be made into a film. We know that James Cameron's going to do Ghost of Hiroshima. So we're seeing a lot now, and hopefully we can use those as tools as we did with The Day After in the 1980s. But it really comes down to education. So it's not having somebody just watch a House of Dynamite, it's then talking to them about that and what was correct and what they can do about it and providing that agency. And so I'll close because I know we got a lot to get to, and I want to get to Q&A with, I know that in my lifetime, when I die, racism and nuclear weapons will probably still be on this planet, the two things that I fight to eliminate the most. But I'm not doing this for me. I'm doing this for future generations. I'm doing it for people that I don't know, younger kids, my niece. That's who I'm doing it for. This is something that is a marathon. It's not a sprint, and we chip away at it. And again, understand the wins that we have had and embrace those. And you know, Dr. King used to always say that the moral arc of the universe is long, but it bends towards justice. But I would argue not unless all of us actually do the bending ourselves. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Inspiring. Um, Folks, if you have questions, please raise your hand or type in the chat. Question from Elpana.
Yeah, first of all, I have to thank you for giving us so much boost and talking about the practical things happening. Thank you so much. So much of information as well. But I think I do a lot of advocacy, lot of it at the federal level from last 10 years now, and 5 years in this organization. So my question here is whatever you said just now, racism and nuclear weapon, and you know that this is still going to exist. I also know that even we die after that too. So how can we uh, take all these issues to the member of Congress and ask them to act? Look at this. Just do not vote for $3 trillion
Yeah,
and like 53 at least at your side, at our side. I know Republicans, they are not going to vote for that. They will do whatever they want. How can
yeah.
we, is there anything, any plan? If you forward it to me or tell me, then I can forward it to the member of Congress.
Sure, great question. So a couple things. One is there are various resolutions in Congress right now that are around this issue. They're not all the same. Some are for the TPNW, some are for other ways to eliminate nuclear weapons. There's multiple, and it can get confusing. And so if you go to nucleartimes.com, the magazine that I'm a managing editor of, the first article you'll see on the front page, I just wrote an article breaking down all of those resolutions to try to make it easier for people that don't live in this space 24/7 to understand, because it can be confusing. So one thing you can do is if there is a resolution that you have researched and that you are in favor of, you can then push to make sure that your congressmen and your representatives are co-sponsoring or backing that resolution. When it comes to elections at the local, state, federal level, you can have meetings and ask those representatives or research and find out where they stand on this issue. And if they are supportive, then be their foot soldiers. And if they are not, then vote for the next person or campaign against them. Bird dog them at events, call them out on a rope line and have a camera. Where do you stand on the TPNW nuclear weapons? Get them on camera, put them on blast. And so you start to put that pressure on them. But also understand that so much of this is tied to lobbying and the nuclear complex, the nuclear industrial complex. So the money that is being poured in to both sides of the aisle by Lockheed and Raytheon and Northrop Grumman is enormous, and they're not going to stop. And so I was giving a talk in Syracuse, New York, where I'm originally from when the book came out. And a lot of the people in the crowd said, we sympathize with you. And we would love to eliminate nuclear weapons. But the main employer in Syracuse, New York is Lockheed Martin. So for them, they were like, it's a jobs program. Find me another job and I'll gladly do it. And so that House rep is not going to go against this issue if they fear they're going to lose votes because everybody in their district will be unemployed. And so you're dealing with that. The amount of money that these weapons manufacturers are giving to college and universities, you're fighting that as well. And so that's the hard part when it comes to kind of changing Congress or changing your leadership. So a lot for me is getting to the point where I'm getting to a point where I'm a little tired of asking or imploring government officials to do the right thing when I know what they're doing is performative and they don't really have any intention of doing it. So
Right.
for me, I'm asking myself, what can we do? What can I do in an organizing sense? How can we get to a point of critical mass where they can't ignore us anymore, regardless of how much money they're getting, where they say that there are millions of people right now that are not going to stop on this issue? We have got to change course. And so it's getting these things, every time there's a presidential election, the amount of work that goes into just trying to get one question on nuclear weapons into a presidential debate. It's constant like that. So those are some of the things, but and it's you for me, instead of focusing so much on Congress, like you don't know what action you do is going to spark the movement. Every conversation you have, every post that you put up on social media, every decision you make in who you wear and what you eat and where you shop and who you read, all of that are small acts of resistance and can play a role. And so, every time I'm flying out to Portland now and I'm reading a book on nuclear disarmament, somebody next to me on the plane inevitably is going, well, why are you reading that? Or what is that about? And boom, now I'm in a conversation to try to change this person if they don't agree with me. And that can happen over and over again. One of the atomic bomb survivors, Coco Kondo, who I'm so close with, the first time I was in Hiroshima, and she had said to me when I was just completely distraught, just broken down, and she said, I'm asking you to just reach people one at a time. And it might seem cliche and it might seem slow, but it's true. And so you kind of got to hold on to those things, especially in a world today where it can seem so gloom and that, these Congress people aren't doing the right thing. And the last thing I would say, especially to younger folks, I will tell them, stop waiting for Congress to do something and run yourself. Run for local office, run for the school board, run for the common council, and start changing things that way instead of hoping that these people are one day going to have an epiphany and do the right thing.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Many Congress members, they don't even know why it is important and why they just keep themselves away. We educate them sometimes.
Yes, and Congress members will be motivated and will hear you for two reasons. Show them that it can get votes or money. And if you can prove those two things to them on something, then they're going to be all ears. In my experience, that's how it works. And so those are the things you want to think about when you're, talking to your Congress people.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Before we go to Goo, there's a question in the chat from Kim Ann. Just what got you started in this work?
Yeah. So I didn't have this, there's a lot of people say that there's this like aha moment, and that didn't happen. For me, it was a process. I think there were a lot of layers. I grew up in Syracuse, New York, and I had amazing parents that instilled in me empathy and compassion and fight for justice. I grew up where a lot of my friends and culture that I was around was on the Onondaga Nation reservation. And so I was learning a lot about growing up Native American rights and what was going on there while I was working, to free Leonard Peltier and other political prisoners. And at the same time, I had the 9 Mile 2 nuclear power plant right there as well. So I was always kind of aware of this. And then, there were, I think for everybody, and when you're young, when you're studying, especially history, you look for somebody in history that you can identify with, somebody that shares a common ancestry with you or looks like you, which is also why I wanted to do this work, because if you are a young Black student and you look at this history of nuclear disarmament, if you don't see anybody that looks like you or shares a common ancestry with you, why would you go down this path, right? And for so long, they've been ignored. And so for me, that person was John Brown. And when I discovered John Brown in history, somebody who was white and somebody who hated slavery and racism so much he was willing to die for it, I was like, okay, I relate to this person way more than kind of the milquetoast abolitionist who was just calling for patience. And so then I read the autobiography of Malcolm X, which had a huge influence on me. Howard Zinn had a huge influence on me. So there's this process of things that were happening. And most of my work was around civil rights and the Black freedom movement. I was mentored by Tom Hayden, by Bobby Seale. These were people that taught me how to be an activist throughout my life. But this issue, like a lot of young people, was totally abstract to me. To me, nobody would be crazy enough to use nuclear weapons. I didn't understand it. Wasn't on my radar. And that changed the first time I went to Hiroshima and Nagasaki. And I went there in 2005, I think was the first time. And I don't know how you can go there, have that kind of veil of ignorance or complacency lifted, and then not act. And so I was going through the museums and meeting with atomic bomb survivors and all these things and bonding with my new Japanese friends. And the night of August 6th, every year in Hiroshima, what they do at the ceremonies in the morning, and then at night they have what's called a lantern ceremony. And it's at a river which is called the T, where the T bridge is. They call it the T bridge because if you take an aerial photo, it looks like a T. And actually, the Enola Gay, the plane that dropped the bomb, used that as a target. And that river, in 45, when it happened, so many people were jumping in that river because they were being burned alive. And what a lot of people don't know is at different times of the day in that river, when the tide comes in, it's salt water. So I just can't imagine the pain they endured. And so people meet there and there's thousands of people there and there's media there and there's music and atomic bomb survivors. And they have the materials there where you can make your own floating lantern and put your own message on it and put it in the water yourself. And I remember being in that line with my new Japanese friends and everything I had witnessed and heard and thought about, all my anger and disgust that my country did this boiled over. And when I put that lantern in the water, I began sobbing uncontrollably. And my Japanese friends were saying, it wasn't you, and look what we did to China, and it's okay. And we were having this, bonding experience. And then Coco Kondo kind of came down and grabbed me and consoled me. And that's what she said. You need to reach people one at a time. And that affected me so much that when I came back, I said, I need to combine these two passions of mine, eliminating racism and eliminating nuclear weapons. And it put me on this path. And I've probably been to Japan, to Hiroshima now, oh God, over a dozen times, if not 20 more times since then. And every time I go, when I get to the lantern ceremony, I think I'm going to be okay. And to this day, if I went, I'd still fall apart all over again. It just gets me every time. There's nothing that can change that. So, for me, I couldn't turn that off. I couldn't pretend I saw that and learned that and then, act like it doesn't exist. And so that's, what started. But it continues. When my niece, who is biracial, my brother-in-law is African-American, when she was born, she's 20 now, I wanted to change the world for her. And so there's all these layers that keep happening of why you want to do something and why you want to keep on this path. But that's, kind of the origin story of how it all got started.
Thank you. And then last question from Guli.
Hi, first of all, kind of is my question was kind of is already kind of is you answer because it's a Kim asked you, so I have to change this my questions. First of all, thanks much for your kind of is time and great storytelling regarding kind of history and everything. I learned a lot. By the way, it's kind of you talked about this kind of is this type of activities kind of you are doing is for future generations. So do you have any kind of special tips from your experience how deal with these young generations about kind of yeah, nuke?
Yes. So the first thing is I always tell students that they all have gifts. And what they do with it is their gift back. I have no artistic ability whatsoever. I can't draw a stick figure to save my life, can't play a musical instrument, just don't have that in me. What I have is my ability to write, my ability to teach, to organize, and that's what I choose to do with it. So I tell them, if you're an artist, if you're a painter, then paint. If you're a poet, then spit. If you're a writer, then write. But use your gifts for whatever you're most passionate about. And so that's one thing. The other thing is I often, with career guidance, you don't tell them you don't want a job. You don't want Sunday night to come and your stomach turns because you got to go to work on Monday. You want to do something you love, something you're passionate about. And you can do that and do something really positive in the world. So it's trying to help them channel that. And then it's finding where their agency is. Some people, they want the bullhorn. They're the person that needs to be out in the street. They're the charismatic one. They're the extrovert. That's not everybody's cup of tea. For some, they're really good at the behind the scenes stuff. Maybe they're really good at the data, the database stuff. Maybe they're really good at journalism. And so it's finding what works for them and how they can then apply that The other thing is providing the resources and being able to educate them on, so that you're not talking up here. How can you bring this down to their level? And it's not going to be the same message. For some, I'll reach them through music. I'll reach them through hip hop artists that I know have addressed this issue. For others, it's going to be through art and different artists. Through others, it'll be more scholarly. So it's not one message for every single person. It's going to be individual of what will get them interested in this issue. And then showing them how they can actually make a difference. And so right now, the hard thing is so many young students are getting their information through social media. And how do you kind of decipher through all the garbage that's on social media? And so, for me, would I rather just write a book and have young folks read it and make a difference? Sure. But the reality is, I have done this and I know that I can make a 2-minute clip on Instagram and get 4 million views and have, 100, 250,000 likes. And I know I'm breaking through to some people. So it's very, it's being able also to use those tools in a clever way to also influence and to shape minds. And so it's looking at all of those things. And again, as I said previously, letting them know that every little action they do could be the thing that sparks a movement. Did that person know they were going to spark the Arab Spring? Did that person know what was going to happen with Tiananmen Square? These people, one thing can do it and not, doubt their ability to do that. Meeting them where they are, not talking at them, not telling them they have to do this, but meeting them where they are, realizing what their challenges are. I would never in a million years think I should go into an indigenous community or communities of color and say, you should be doing this or you should care. Absolutely not. It's for me to go and listen and earn trust and build bridges. And it takes time for me then to be able to say, okay, how can we work together on this issue? When they say, well, OPSR is always at our issues. They're always on the front lines with us. How can we be there for them? And that's how you start to build those coalitions and so that you're working together. So there's not one message, there's not one way to say this is how you get them involved. There's multiple ways. So it's just finding, being creative and finding all those different ways that you can connect with them. And again, while we're talking, I'll put more information in the chat for me. Anybody can reach out. There's questions I haven't answered, resources I can give you, anything of that nature. You want to connect offline, one-on-one, speak to your organization, whatever it is, I'm here for you. And we can, start building together even more. So thank you.
Thanks much. Thank you.
Fantastic. Virtual round of applause. We can. Wow, inspiring. Yeah, I can't thank you enough for coming and speaking to us. And really glad to have you in the best coast, the West Coast. Um, I could already tell, like, this is going to make a big difference.
Sean,
Steve.
if I'm on, I just want to reiterate that Vincent, I'll come on screen if I can. I'm a board member with Sean. I got gray hair. I'm newbie to this, but I'm telling you, fantastic. So it will not be the last you've heard from us. I'm so happy this was recorded, Sean. I saw that it was. And so we'll be scratching our heads how to just leverage tonight. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Vincent. Feel free to stick around, but I totally understand if you got to rest. And
I'm
we're
here.
gonna
No worries.
try to transition on with our agenda. Tara, are you still with us?
Yes, I am.
Tara, if you'd like to talk some more about the militarism education work y'all are planning and how we can collaborate, now is the time.
Sounds good. Yeah, so Sound Defense Alliance, the organization I work with, we're mainly focused on the Navy Growler jets, which are based on Whidbey Island, but they impact over 7 counties across Washington. And the jet noise is just really, really harmful and very expensive training. And so we're thinking this coming February, potentially March, we want to hold a month-long campaign to be raising awareness around military costs and mainly financial costs. We know there's so many other costs, including the cost to our health and mental health and everything, but this one will be focused on financial costs. And so we have folks from Washington Physicians for Social Responsibility, Veterans for Peace, and then the Northwest Against Nuclear Weapons group coming to talk on a panel that we'll be holding. But I wanted to just open up the invitation for anyone here to attend, but also if you have any interest in collaborating with us on this project. It's still in the working progress of getting it all organized. So I'm going to put my email in the chat, and if anyone has any interest, let me know. And then I'll also find the link to our mailing list so that people can sign up and be notified when we do put out the announcements for this event and webinar. And you can also follow us on social media. So you'll see it'll be a month-long campaign of education. So every single social media post of that month will be focused around education on this. So yeah, does anyone have any questions about it while I'm on this call?
Maybe as a quick follow-up, there, am I correct that there might be some other monthly education themes that may align with this group?
Yeah, so that one actually is just the military cost one is kicking us off for this whole 2026 campaign that I'm hoping to do. And so every single month of the year, I want to focus on a different topic. And so other topics throughout the year will include impacts from the military on orcas. We'll also do a month long on hearing health, as well as PTSD. And so, yeah, the focus is really every single month will be a different topic, and we'll dedicate that whole month to education and collaboration with other groups, so that our communities have more awareness and have resources to get involved. And there also will be some fundraising as well in there to help us fundraise for some projects. We want to get some money for a hydrophone to do another orca study and figure out how these military impacts are really getting to our endangered orcas.
Fantastic. Yeah, folks, if that any of those other ideas or that idea inspires you, definitely reach out to Tara and I will share their email and a follow-up as well. But any other questions for Tara?
John, not, it's just a comment to Tara. Tara, we have a place in the Methow Valley up north of Winthrop, and those
Yeah,
planes come blowing through at eye level up this valley in the most unbelievable times. So there's a community that has political activism in it. I'm not deep into it, but if you have not connected with anybody in that space to support your voice on their fly around there, consider it.
for sure. Thank you. Yeah, we are connected with the folks over there, and they've done
Okay,
some good work over there too. So thank you.
excellent.
So, any other questions for Tara? Going
All
once?
right, thank you, everyone.
All right. Thank you, and looking forward to working with you.
Yeah, you too.
Next, I have a request from a coalition partner, Washington for Peace and Justice. While there isn't someone from that group on this call, I do want to just reiterate what the request is and see if we have consensus on supporting. Washington for Peace and Justice is a Palestinian-led um, advocacy organization in Washington State. They are working on a divestment campaign. So some quick facts. Washington State invests 1.5 billion in companies that give Israel weapons. Um, and you should care because this is your hard-earned money that companies are using to destroy human lives, children's futures, and it's inhumane. They're asking to sign a petition and to circulate it to tell the Washington State Investment Board to divest from genocide and apartheid occupation and these weapons companies, um, so that they can share it with the Washington State Investment Board. Um, the petition only takes about 2 to 3 minutes to fill out. And then the next thing, which is kind of more of an ask for us, is supporting the campaign as an organization or as our coalition. They are looking for partners willing to support this effort at different levels. Right now, the ask is just to circulate the petition and sign on. I did ask a clarifying question, right? So they're targeting really any of the weapons companies that also produce nuclear weapons like Northrop Grumman. So there is a clear overlap in our work. And then at our April conference, we did vote that we are interested in supporting divestment work as a coalition. So with that, I just want to get a temperature check for folks. Are there any concerns about us supporting this petition and signing on as an organization? Vincent.
Yeah, I'm not familiar with the specifics of this petition, but since you mentioned divestment, I think divestment is a really good way, organizing tool that we can use on this issue. New York City worked with ICANN, the International Campaign to Abolish Nuclear Weapons, and they got the New York City Pension Fund to divest $420 million from nuclear weapons making producers. That's a big win. So I think any divestment campaign that we could do against the weapons manufacturers would be great. So yeah, I think it's a great tool to use.
Awesome. Uh, yeah, any questions or other potential concerns? Steve?
Sean, yeah, I'll just jump in and say that there will be a statement, if not present, soon, maybe this weekend, on our website, WPSR website, from the board of a statement regarding Gaza in a broad sense of, many aspects to it that I think people can look at and find supportive of this sort of action.
Thank you. That's yeah, good to hear.
And I'll just say, I mean, of course, there's not a lot going on in that space around Gaza at this moment because of the sort of transitional period that, and and that was part of the discussion as to whether it is a good time to put this out, given that there's not a lot of other organizations doing such. My feeling was, and this that you're talking about makes me feel that it's a perfect time, where there's not a lot of voices, and our voice, the WPSR voice, can support this sort of initiative.
Thank you.
I have,
Let's see, Andy,
yeah,
and then
can I make one comment on that?
um, yeah, who's speaking right now?
Nancy. Yeah, I
Nancy?
guess I'm on audio. Yeah, I'm on
Yeah,
audio.
go ahead, Nancy.
I strongly support, and we know it's worked for fossil fuels, and that was a big campaign with 350 Seattle for a long time, and it's worked in Washington for that. So, and a lot of other places for the, and this is so related to climate. So I think tying it to climate is a good idea, and to health, and um, that all the rest of the things too. I think it's important to make those connections at the same time. So totally support. They are on the right path. So
Awesome. And then Andy?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention that Oregon PSR has on our website a statement on Gaza that we put up in, I think, September. It's a strong statement. I think what we've said is still true, even though things are hopefully changing in Gaza. And looking at our websites as an opportunity to get out what our passions are, what our beliefs are, what we are really pushing for. Um, when we read journal articles, there's often a little summary at the beginning. It's the abstract. And we should be using that technique. I was just on another call today that somebody mentioned that, and it's like, don't make our statements like our statement on Gaza is a couple of pages, and it's not a bad idea to put our thoughts into a little paragraph at the top that really summarizes everything, because people are more likely to do sound bites and to grab that and to quote it and to use it again. So let's all think about how we communicate, not only in social networking and in letters to the editor and all this, but also on our websites. Thanks.
Thanks, Andy. Vincent, did you have another comment or? Okay. So maybe we'll just go for a vote of unanimous consent. So any opposed to the coalition signing on to this? Okay. Uh, yeah, seeing none, I think we'll go ahead and do that. Thanks, everyone. Let's see. Next on the agenda, I was hoping we would have either Carl or Eric on today, but I'll just provide a quick summary. We endorsed a Armistice Day event this Tuesday in Tacoma. Um, we were able to speak about some of our issues briefly, and Dr. Carl Rieken from our nuclear task force was able to speak and share about his experience as a conscientious objector. So it was really great. There was a great coalition of folks in the six. I know I saw Joanne there. Hey, Joanne. So thanks for those that were able to come out to that event and continue to put pressure on Emily Randall, who represents Bangor and therefore thousands of nuclear weapons.
Why did you call it Armistice Day? It was changed to Veterans Day in about 1953.
A new coalition member of ours is the South Sound chapter of About Face Veterans Against the War, and they are taking up a call to reclaim Armistice Day from Veterans Day, to use it as a celebration of peace rather than veterans. Uh, Joanne, you're on mute if you have a comment.
Hmm.
Veterans for Peace have been saying the same things for several years. And so I think a number of veterans groups are supporting this. You don't want to use the day to extol militarism. You want to use the day to extol an armistice, an end to war. And so I think that's what their thinking is.
Yeah. And I of course need to mention our coalition member Zahid Chowdhury, president of the Rachel Corrie chapter of Veterans for Peace, is still being held in the Northwest Detention Center. And a major theme of that event was solidarity and support for him. Um, uh, yeah, some of you may know Zahid. I know folks in Olympia certainly do. He's being denied a medication that is preventing, or medication prevents him from losing his eyesight. So he's losing his eyesight in the detention center. Um, it is an enormous stain on our community in Tacoma to have the detention center here. And if folks are interested, the About Face folks are asking for character letters for Zahid for his trial. And I'm happy to put folks in touch if you're interested, know him, or want to come visit him in the detention center. Joanne, go ahead.
I just wanted to say that the speeches that people gave were absolutely excellent. And the one that Zahid's wife, Melissa Chaudry, gave was outstanding. It was recorded, and if it's possible to get a copy of it, I would certainly recommend that you have a showing because it was just a very inspiring day.
Yeah, I can try to get that recording for folks. Thanks, Joanne. Next, I want to turn us to some of our priorities. First, we're going to start with faith outreach. So, folks that are new to this space, at our April conference, we worked with the Office of the Seattle Archdiocese to pen a statement against nuclear weapons, and it's signed by Archbishop Achin in Seattle and several other faith leaders. And we voted to continue to try to solicit signatures and support of faith leaders around our region for this statement. There is a page on our website where folks can read that and see the current signers. Just put that in the chat, and then folks can sign on if you represent faith communities or a faith leader yourself. We've been a little slow to get new statements, new signers. So I want to just ask folks here tonight, can anyone just think of either, a friend that goes to a church you may know of, or maybe you go to a church yourself, or know of maybe a progressive church that you'd be willing to reach out to. So if you can think of one church, just go ahead and unmute yourself and say it, or type it in the chat.
I'll do both, Sean. Yeah, get it to me.
Yeah.
Great.
We our small Bellingham group, we had a small meeting, and we do have a list of churches in our area. And so we've taken on, let's see how many, four different ones where we've assigned to different people. But I do need more. I need you to send that to me again on how we can do it and
Absolutely.
how we can approach that. We're going to start with, you know, trying to talk to the peace and justice committees that are often that they have. So that's where we're starting.
That is
And
a perfect place
are
to start.
in the process of one. So um, anyway, we'll see how it goes.
Excellent.
I
Excellent.
would appreciate hearing that, getting that too, that information. I met some people in my area campaigning recently, and a lot of information on the churches nearby in Kenmore and Bothell and those areas. So I would like to hear what this is about. So
Perfect.
So, Sean, what is the goal of reaching out to the churches? I didn't get it.
We see churches and faith leaders as community leaders. I think rightfully so. They have a captive audience every Sunday. People look to them for moral guidance. And a lot of the times, if you get enough of them together, members of Congress will listen to them. So our objective is to, with this letter, is to have a way to get in the door, talk to them, and give them a really small way that they can take action. And then once they've done that, we want to maybe ask for something bigger, continue to motivate them, so on and so forth.
I get it. Thank you.
I see on there Reverend Megan Pritchard, who's a pastor with the UCC, and also our environmental justice chair for the conference. And so at our last meeting, I brought up having us send this out through our conference newsletter. And the recommendation was to maybe move this to our national UCC level. So that is what I'm planning to do in these next couple of weeks. And then I'll also pass it by Spirit of Peace United Church of Christ, their pastor, Jen Hagedorn, who, and I know that their church is already supportive. So I think it's just a clerical thing that we haven't gotten to yet. So thanks again for lifting that up tonight.
Excellent, and thank you for doing that.
Yeah.
On the national level, I will let folks know, especially if we have folks from Fox Christi here. There is a kind of a new national group starting called the No Faith in Nukes Coalition. Um, it's more DC based at the moment, but it may be able to expand to more regional leadership.
Mm.
Joanne?
Yeah, and I just wanted to say that we have a Presbyterian Peace Fellowship, and they became very excited and attended our April conference. They're also working on getting a national, what they call it, a national resolution, so that the entire Presbyterian Church will back the TPNW. And so that's in process right now, but that's a move forward.
Excellent. Excellent. Yeah, thanks folks for offering that.
Uh,
Uh,
yeah, hey, can I
Steve?
just ask Joanne to post either through you her information on the Presbyterian National Focus? We're just a little church, and I'd love to know what the big boys are doing, big girls.
Okay, Steve, could you put your email address and I'll contact
I'll
you?
I'll put it in the chat.
Yeah,
Thanks.
thank you.
Last thing I'll just leave folks with is Archbishop HN has submitted a piece to the Jesuit Review American Magazine about, speaking for disarmament, and I think it was really well done. So encourage folks to check that out, particularly if you're coming from the Catholic faith. Moving on to New Start. We are 84 days away from expiration. So once again, I'll just remind folks, we have a pre-made letter campaign. We would love to get more people to see it and to know about it. urging your members of Congress to speak out, to take action, sign on to HRES 100, and call for arms limitation talks and diplomacy. Folks in Northwest Washington and folks in Eastern Washington, we have had some meetings with Representative Larson and Representative Baumgartner. So it's kind of working its way up the channel, and the only way that that's going to be lubricated, in my view, is with a lot of grassroots pressure. So if you're, yeah, in Larson's district in particular, or Baumgartner's, yeah, please contact them, spread the word, get people to call the office. We need them to hear about this. But that's true for everybody too. Um, just as a reminder, the only two representatives who have signed on and really made public statements about the expiration of New START in Washington are Representative Pramila Jayapal and Representative Adam Smith. Our senators have said nothing. That's eight, eight representatives who have said nothing. And that really has to change.
Mhm.
Folks on the call, are there any other tools that you need to help you work on this issue, help you spread the word? What would be helpful for you to tell your members about this?
Sean, if you email the new resolution that you want us to talk with the member of Congress, and whatever you think that is the important thing that you should talk, we actually met with them, and face to face we pressured them. And that's why Adam Smith, he just says from the very beginning, no, you think it's very, I can do it, I can't. Yes, you can do it. You're the chair. You can do it. You need some votes, but you can do it. And then we pressurize again and again and again. Finally, then and Pramila Jayapal also. They ask us to come.
Great.
But other leaders, they don't care.
So I will send specifics to Seattle Indivisible. Thank you,
Yeah.
Alpana. Julia, did you have a question, comment?
Yeah, on the NWANW website, you have the time clock or whatever you call it. The countdown. But with that countdown, it doesn't have a link or explanation. You have to go somewhere else on the website, I guess, for that. So I just thought it would be, if you added that with the clock, it would be more effective.
Yeah, there was a paragraph below it, but I know that the plugin isn't that great that we found, but yeah. Yeah, I will take a look at that. But one challenge we had is we couldn't get the clicking on the clock to route somebody anywhere but the plugin's website. Um, okay, anything else folks need or ideas folks have on how to get this moving? Cindy?
Yeah, I just, yeah, if we can get that information, it'd be great for all of it. We are going to have a watch party on a house of dynamite. And that is going to be our action, is we're going to have everybody there call or email or do, something on New Start. So that's one thing. The other thing I just want to say is the mayor of Bellingham, Kim Lund, has agreed to sign on to Mayors for Peace. And so we're gonna and she's actually sent us a letter back. I mean, I met with her once, or we all met with her once, and then she said yes, and she's actually made the application to Mayors for Peace. So I'm hoping that we can, you know, keep encouraging her to do some educational things with Bellingham. So anyway, so then maybe we can again get people to do more on this, worry a little more maybe. Okay.
Yeah, fantastic work. Really excited to hear about the watch party. Excited to hear the news about Mayor Lund. You know, as folks may recall we worked with Harry and Back from the Brink to get a series of proclamations issued, right? So finding even just like the small asks to get us in the door to get the issue in, really make a difference. Lynn, go ahead.
Back several months ago, for Sunday, our church completed Climate Hope cards, and those Climate Hope cards are going to be delivered to a staff of Kim Schreier within probably the month. And the two main messages on those cards were to really support the renewable energy transition, despite the direction our current administration is going, and to really focus on nuclear disarmament. And so if you provide some talking points about restart the new start, that would be so helpful for those folks, probably me, but not necessarily, for when they deliver the cards to the staff of Kim Schreier to really, I think, emphasize what our goals are as a faith community supporting Kim Schreier moving in this direction and really having a voice.
Absolutely. Happy to do that and really
Thank you.
excited to hear that. I know that there was a group in Olympia that did some cards recently, and well, yeah. Joanne, do you want to go next?
Yeah, I was just going to say, since you mentioned the clock, I don't know if you are familiar with Tim and Wallace's book, Nuclear Abolition, a Scenario, but his scenario is not a countdown of minutes. His scenario is a countdown of a reduction of minutes on the clock. So he uses, if something good happened, we're farther away from, there are more minutes added of time. So it's a useful kind of technique. I just have to say too, I stopped at Barnes and Nobles by chance, and I was ordering a paper copy of his book. And I mentioned to the woman there by chance that, there's this movie out now, and I think it's going to be a very popular movie, this House of Dynamite. And I said, maybe, you can order some extra copies of the book. And maybe while you're at it, there's this other book, this nuclear war book. And she says, I think that that's a great idea. And I think I'll order the books. But now that I think about it, I think we're going to set up a table. And the table will have on it the movie. And then these two books, we'll order enough books that will fill up the table. That was her idea. So go to your bookstore and just see if it works in your bookstore.
And of course, pitch our book club as well, the Nuclear Abolition Reading Room run by Dan Worthen, meeting every month, usually reading a different book. Uh, yeah. Great, folks. Well, it's really inspiring to hear what people are willing to take on around New Start.
Sean,
Go ahead.
I was just going to ask that I forgot that from Bellingham, if you and she can send out the mayoral proclamation and sort of update me on that particular process. We, as you know, have a new woman mayor of Seattle, and it just happens that one breakfast meeting, I sat right next to her and started talking to her about nuclear issues. Clearly, that was not on her agenda, but I think she was probably. I think she'll remember it. So I would love to follow up.
That'd be great. And she does know our economic inequity work quite well. So that is another link in there.
Yeah.
I just wanted to provide a little bit of kind of recent news on New Start for folks before we move on. I might just read this verbatim. In a brief interview with the Russian Foreign Minister Sergei Lavrov, he was asked, there is not much time before the New START treaty expires. Yet the United States has not presented the official stance on President Putin's initiative. Do you think the United States will respond in the near future, if by any chance an articulate answer never comes, would that make a difference for Russia? So Lavrov said, we have made it clear many times that this proposal is a unilateral gesture of goodwill on our behalf. No talks or consultations are needed for the United States to support our approach. All the United States needs to do is state that it will not raise the quantitative limits under the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty for 1 year, that is at least for as long as Russia adheres to its own unilateral commitment. That's all there is to it. No further steps are required. So, that is the offer from the Russians. Again, is that they will maintain those limits for 1 year, which really gives enough time for a new treaty to be negotiated. Um, you know, for all that can be said about the evils of oligarchy in Russia, I think we have to be aware that they are trying to prevent this bilateral arms race, and the United States needs to respond to this gesture with our own gesture of goodwill.
Yeah, just a note on that. When the Russians made that statement, the sources that I had in DC where it said that Trump was being told to respond, and he had his response ready, which we don't know what it was, but he never made it because that was the day he got sidetracked and decided to take the whole day to talk about Tylenol causing autism. So he's so easily distracted that he never responded, and now we're still waiting for that. But that was the day he was supposed to actually have a public response to it.
Well, hard to even respond. Yeah. Um,
Which means really Epstein had come up, and so he was looking for the most absurd thing to talk about.
yeah. Yeah. It kind of comes back to our previous speaker. Dr. Helen Caldicott was at our last meeting, and really stressing the media. How do we reach the media? Because the media reaches Trump, celebrity reaches Trump. These are all things that previous iterations of our movement were able to do. So, yeah. Now there have been movements on nuclear testing as well since we last met. I know folks may not be up to speed. I'm going to try to provide a brief timeline of how this has gone. So first, you had Trump get on Truth Social, which is like his version of Twitter, and make this really crazy claim that he's directed the Department of War to begin nuclear testing immediately in response to the nuclear tests being done by, our adversaries. This followed, a nuclear launcher test that Russia had conducted. But as far as anyone knows, there's been no atmospheric tests. And then you had people like Senator Tom Cotton and CIA Director Ratcliffe call for resuming, explosive nuclear tests. Trump, kind of affirmed or didn't back down on a question as he was, I think, getting offer on to Air Force One. And then Congress has responded pretty quickly. So Senator Ed Markey has introduced legislation to block nuclear testing in the Senate, and then in the House, Dina Titus has introduced the Restraint Act. We put out an action alert. We got about 100 folks or 150 folks to take action, right there, members of Congress to speak out or sign on to this legislation. And then just recently, the U.S. was the only country to veto a resolution affirming the tenets of the Comprehensive Test Ban Treaty. So I think a lot of us thought maybe this would go away, but this continues to play a role, to be on our radar. And we do need to make sure that we maintain the taboo on this, and that our members of Congress know that a return to testing is unacceptable. So, as folks are talking to their members and having these conversations, I think we just need to treat this seriously and be aware that this is a part of our core demands is no more nuclear testing.
So can you send me the details of those two bills that they have signed,
Yes.
and the information that Trump has asked to start the nuclear testing?
Yes.
That
Yeah.
information, so that I can take that note. And coming December meeting, we can talk about that.
Yeah,
Without
absolutely. Can send that around, and if folks can help us amplify this, take action. That would be really great.
Thank you.
Any questions, comments on nuclear testing? It's all right if not. I know it's been a long meeting. Um, I'm gonna transition us. We want to get updates from Back from the Brink. We have Harry with us from Back from the Brink. Harry, if you're ready, we'll have you go on ahead.
Cool, great. It's really an honor to be here with all of you as always. I see a few new folks on the call today, so just to briefly introduce myself, my name's Harry. I'm a community organizer with Back from the Brink, and if anyone hasn't heard of Back from the Brink, we're a national coalition that's growing a grassroots movement in the U.S. for 5 policy goals about preventing nuclear war and eliminating nuclear weapons globally, and we're delighted to be endorsed by the Northwest Against Nuclear Weapons. And my main thing I'm really excited to tell you all about today is we're hosting an event I want to invite you to in a week and a half. And just to give some brief context. So, Back from the Ranks theory of change is that to get our federal government to fundamentally change policies on nuclear weapons, we need more leadership from everyday people like us as well as our politicians. We need the members of Congress and local governments to speak up about this much more loudly than they are now and help to educate the public about it, help to put pressure on the White House. This happened once before in our history in the 1980s during the nuclear freeze movement. That historians think that movement played a key role in getting our government and other governments to reduce the global nuclear stockpile by about 80%. And as Steve mentioned, we just had some elections. There are some new opportunities to build relationships with the Seattle City Council. Two of the new elected officials in Seattle have told us that they would be interested in meeting with us about Back from the Brink. That's on top of two existing members of the Seattle City Council who've also told us the same thing. So we now have 4 city officials in Seattle who've told us they're interested in working with us on Back from the Brink. I think there's a strong chance that we can pass a Back from the Brink resolution here. So we're hosting a statewide strategy session on Sunday, November 23rd. It's going to be in Seattle, but you're welcome, and we'd be delighted to have you join by Zoom as well. It's going to be hybrid, and we'll be strategizing about how we can pass a Back from the Brink resolution about preventing nuclear war in the Seattle City Council, the King County Council, and also get our 2 federal senators, Senator Murray and Cantwell, to endorse Back from the Brink as well. So just, yeah, I would be really interested to see a quick show of hands. Who here would be interested in joining that, either by Zoom or in person? Awesome. I see Lynn, Kim. Great. Okay.
Add,
So,
add Steve. Add Steve. I couldn't get through
okay,
to
great.
Dan.
Lynn, Kim, Steve. I'll follow up with all of you. Um, And yeah, and then I'm just gonna drop in the chat really quick. There's an RSVP link if you want to take a look, get some more information about what time it is. If you sign up on that link, we'll send you the Zoom link and all the information. Also, 2 other quick links. Those second and third links are sign-on letters. So if your organization, I know a bunch of our organizations have signed on to the sign-on letters directed at our members of Congress and the Seattle City Council about Back from the Brink. If your organization hasn't signed on yet, we hope you'll consider doing so. And are there any quick questions or comments about any of that before I hand it back to Sean? Awesome. Well, good to see you all. And I'll pass it back to you, Sean.
Thank you, Harry. Exciting, very exciting work. Okay, we are in the coalition meetings portion of uh, our agenda. This is where you get to hear about the different things going on for members around the state. But I want to start maybe by Kim, if you're up for it. Would you tell folks about what we're doing on Saturday?
Yeah, so on Saturday, me and Sean will be leading a anti-nuclear weapons party, and this party is going to have like a game simulation involved, and so we're gonna split people up into like 6 fictional countries, and they're basically gonna be playing like the role of like where are you gonna put your resources in because everyone will get a certain number of resource points, And after that, they get to like think about like, do we want to invest in nuclear weapons? We will start to like push them a little bit and have these like scenarios. And so it's just going to be a way to like simulate this like real life experience to educate them, but also give people the experience to learn more about nuclear weapons in the state. And so this is kind of our fun way of making this like teach-in into a more interactive game that will then lead to some discussions and reflections and then a presentation a little bit on just like how they can get involved and what they can learn from it. So wish us luck. It's going to be at El Centro in Seattle. And right now we might have around like 30-ish people. And so it's really exciting to see if that can expand a little bit more and also have a wide range of people. But for right now, it's like young adult oriented. And so trying to get the young people involved. But we do hope to give space for all types of people to come and get and join in.
Great. Kim, actually, for folks that don't know, could you tell them who you are?
Oh, that's true. Hi, I'm Kim. I went on a like fierce nonviolent pilgrimage with Sean back in like August and a little bit of end of July. And we went around different parts of Washington State for 11 days to learn more about how like nuclear weapons are being made in Washington State, the waste. We went to Hanford, we went to different Native American locations and tribes in Spokane, Yakima, Bainbridge. We did like a peace walk. We then even like protest at the naval base. So we got to do a lot of things in those 11 days. And then we had a coordinator who is a Japanese man that does the Catholic worker in the Dandelion House in Oregon. And then he brought his father along, who's a Hiroshima bomb survivor, to like join us on this pilgrimage. And so we got to hear from him like 5 times about his like life story and then just continuously build community with those who have been affected by nuclear weapons. And we had a range of different people who were either from Iowa, Kansas, Seattle, Washington, like Hanford. So that was like a very interesting experience, just being in community with others who cared about this work and who also had different like faith backgrounds. And so that was a really great experience to build community in a very like joyful and spiritual way. And we did a lot of singing, which Sean didn't really like, but that was a lot of fun to get to do. And so because of that pilgrimage, those who were involved in it are now trying to host more like teach-ins or bring in the young people into the space, especially because we're not really informed by it or we're not really taught it in school. And so how do we bring this to our friends and to our family? And I think it's funny when I came back from the pilgrimage and, you know, my friends end up going on normal vacations like Japan or Korea or something. And I'm over here like, I went on nuclear weapons like pilgrimage for like 11 days. Haha. So that was a lot of fun.
Awesome. Thank you, Kim. Um, let's see. Julia, would you be able to give an update on our meeting and whatever else No More Bombs is working on?
Oh, yeah, so Sean came up to La Conner recently, last week, I think it was. And a group of us met with Congressman Larson's aide and talked to her about nuclear testing, about New START, and about Back from the Brink. And we're hoping to have a follow-up meeting with an aide that is more familiar with the nuclear issues. So we've asked for that. So we'll see. And by the way, No More Bombs is working on contacting in various ways, having, you know, people contact Larson. So.
Excellent. Excellent. Um, okay, other updates from around the region. Let's see. I'm gonna start with David. David, you're on mute. There you go.
Yeah, I just want to announce I'm David Lambert, and I'm involved in Western Washington FOR. And we're having, many of you know this, we're having our annual fall conference a week from this coming Saturday on the 22nd. And we're very pleased that we're going to have a training on non-cooperation, non-violence, non-cooperation. We're having a couple of trainers. One one from Portland and one from right here in Western Washington, um, who have done training with the Freedom Trainers. And so it's going to be a 2-hour training, intro kind of a thing. And it'll be very interactional, opportunity for small 5 to 10 minute discussion groups, 2 or 3 of those. So, like I said, it'll be very interactional. And it'll be a couple of, one of our main projects for years and years has been what we've called the Mike Earl. Mike Earl and his wife started a young peace activist, nonviolent peace activist training academic year, and some of the people spend more than a year, age 14 to 23, and a couple of them are going to be one in particular is going to be quote live, and the other is going to send her video and programs they have, and one of them is from Olympia, a young woman in college, and she's going to be talking about nuclear issues and her involvement that way. And yeah, so that we certainly have room for more people. And we encourage all you guys just 3 hours. And it's I just think it's very timely, whatever your social issues are, they're all interrelated. And again, non-cooperation is needed more than ever. Collective non-cooperation is needed, very timely. So thank you very much. And you can go to the Western Washington FOI website to find a link for registration. Brown Paper Tickets also has, you can go there, send in a check, whatever. So thank you very much.
Thank you, David, and thank you for all your work on producing that event. It's exciting. Um, John and Cindy.
Yeah, I just want Harry to know that we haven't given up on the Bellingham City Council, and we're gonna kind of surround and contact one of the members who of the city council who just went through an election and now he's been elected, who said that he really believed in Back from the Brink. So if we can get one of the council members to really start pushing, we're going to try that. So we're not giving up yet.
That's awesome.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm so appreciative of all the work you all are doing in Bellingham, and I didn't mention we have people actively working on Back from the Brink in Olympia, Redmond, and Vancouver. I know. So yeah, I mentioned just a few places we're going to be discussing our strategy session. Just 'cause it's like a 1.5 hour meeting, but yeah, you all are doing great work in Bellingham, so super appreciate that.
Some Thank you all. Let's see. Alpina, what's going on with Seattle Indivisible?
Yeah, Seattle Invisible is talking with the mayor, trying to find out what is the next step the mayor is taking, or the council members, or what they're planning, their internal. So the vice mayor, Greg, his name is Greg, he spoke, and UCLA director, of outreach, she both spoke, and they declared that our question was what we will do when military people is going to be in both sides of the road in Seattle, in Washington state, because they are nearby. What is the next step? So they said that that there will be camera all over on the both sides of the road, and when it is going to happen, then if for no reason you see that for no reason they are just arresting you, you need to call a hotline number that they will give, and vice mayor will be there with a lawyer on the spot. Send the location, and he's going to be there, and he will take care of everything, because the lawyer will be with him, whether it is valid or not, why you are arresting, the reason of your arrest, and everything. I mean, this doesn't sound like will work, because there are so many ways that they can still arrest people. Um, and so this on this we are working on this, and also I'm doing nationwide public training, public education, um, how to defend democracy and what is democracy. Every month there will be a different topic. Legislative, how does the legislative session work? And then comes how would you do the advocacy? This kind of ongoing training this year. That's going to be in Mobilize also.
Thank you,
Yeah.
Alpana. That
Yeah.
very exciting work.
Yeah.
Uh,
And
Guli,
if you people need outreach in this, just let me know, because I have only one spot left, because one organization I left, that committee I left, so I can do that. But if it is late, then I'll join somewhere else.
thank you. Yeah, if you could put your email in the chat, and folks can follow up with you.
Thank you.
Um, go ahead.
Yep. First of all, thanks again for your support to the Hecho, who was part of Flotilla to Gaza. She got detained but is released back to Korea. So we had meeting with Hecho and his local young people, Korean Americans. So we built the solidarity to support this Palestine issue. Not only that, but also it's a kind of recent South Korean government is released the press is regarding nuclear submarines. So we keep kind of working on anti-militarism, and then especially nowadays is North Korea also kind of is try to launch some other kind of missile test. So we keep is working with this a Korean organization as well. So we will do is a kind of monthly meeting. So we will do some meeting in December as well. Yeah, that's just for update. And thanks much.
Excellent. Yeah, glad Chicho made it out okay.
Mhm.
Let's see, Louise. Oh, don't have your hand up. Never mind. Uh, I see in the chat that the Snake River Alliance is working with Idaho Downwinders on a series of workshops about RECA. Fantastic. Yeah, Lee, we worked on RECA and lobbied our members of Congress about it, so I'm glad it passed. Okay, seeing no other updates. It's been a long meeting. Thank you all for being here. Really excellent contributions by everybody. So, yeah, look out for an email. I have some follow-up asks, and I will send the recording as well of Vincent's talk. Hope everybody has a great rest of your nights.
Yeah. Thank you. Good night. Bye.
Thank you.
Thanks, Sean.
Thanks, Sean. Thanks, Sean.
Thank you. Take care.